Oh, I was in Napier doing gigs when they had the problems there, and it was horrific because I was making jokes about it the first night, and the second night I was not making jokes about it. Like, people were hospitalised.
Yeah.
So hopefully they don't overreact, but if it's necessary, then yeah.
State Services Commissioner trying to get state sector CEO salary rises curbed. We discussed it yesterday. Peter Lewis of Auckland, the solution to the public service CEO pay rise issue is quite simple. Arrange it so each board gets a set sum of money to pay both the board members and the CEO, and then each dollar extra given to the CEO will mean $1 less in the pay packets of the board members. This is called the incentive system, says Peter. Is this a brilliant sort of suggestion?
I'm not sure. Does that affect the quality of your board then? I'm not sure about that suggestion. I don't know enough about how these things work.
Here is the more serious email, actually. Kia ora, Hemi. I'm not a CEO, but a CIO, a Chief Imagination Officer.
That's a cool title.
It is a great title. Of an NGO with 18 staff.
Oh, I thought they were doing a joke. They're the Chief Imagination Officer.
Yeah,
That's great.
This is from Tommy Kapai-Wilson. He says, there's a perception out there that because I head a social service organisation looking after the homeless, the lost and the lonely, I should be paid accordingly, as in pohara, poor man's pay. I believe our remuneration should stand alongside mainstream profit-driven companies. And if we start measuring and remunerating on the basis of mana, not money, as the currency of success, we as a country will all benefit. Have we ever had societies that truly put mana above money? I know you'll both agree with Tommy in principle.
Yeah, I mean, what he says is absolutely right, isn't it? And you need to recognise good work and pay people what they're worth. On the other hand, for a non-profit or a community organisation, there has to be probably some acknowledgement that it's not going to be the same as the private sector. If you go into that field, probably you're going to be paid a bit less.
We've presumably had societies at times that were able to restrain greed either through religion or austerity or whatever. Do you reckon we can change this society?
Seems unlikely, right? Yeah. If I got paid what I was worth, I wouldn't get paid anything. So I'm very lucky that we've got the capitalist system that we have at the moment, and I'm living de vida loca.
All right, I'll go back to Christmas shopping. One of the trends this year is called Tagoma, which stands for Take Games Outside and Make Them Active. And I wonder what you think of this, whether it's a kind of sensible capitulation to young people being on their devices all the time, or whether it just makes the whole problem worse. An example is a new trampoline, which has sensors that Bluetooth to a tablet on the side of the tramp. And the sensors track movement, and your jumping controls an electronic game on the screen, and you can see how often and how high you jump. It's called a smart tramp, and it's won 2 Good Design Awards.
That sounds like a recipe for disaster and injury to me, doesn't it? Jumping on a tramp whilst looking at a screen?
Well, not everybody likes the idea, I must admit, but nevertheless, it has its plaudits as well.
Well, the kind of concept is cool, isn't it? And combining devices and movement, I think that's really good.
Does it help though? My Apple Watch tells me, it rewards me for when I stand up. It says you just stand up every hour. And I'm like, if that's the benchmark for success, then we've got a major problem. And it's weird.
If technology encourages sedentary children to get outside and play when they otherwise wouldn't, that is said to be a positive.
Yes, that is a positive.
Do you think it really works that way, or they soon find it easier to go back indoors where the tablet is stationary and they can sit down and play a game on the couch?
It would be nice if we could encourage our kids to go outside and do things without a tablet or a device attached to their person, and have a bit of a balance of both, wouldn't it? You can go inside and do things on devices, go outside, do things in nature.
Or are we simply regarding this through the eyes of the old world?
Well, yeah, probably.
It's really interesting how far trampolines have come, because when I was a young kid, we didn't even have pads on the trampolines, and it's like they were designed to hurt children.
That's true. They just had those springs on the side.
And then we got pads, and people were like, it's Blue Creek that's gone mad. And then now they've got walls, and they're springless, and it's really wonderful what that company has done for New Zealand trampolines.
It is great to have... I'm only stopping you because of what you're saying is interesting, but I'm just stopping you because I hear the music.
I'm getting played off.
Played off. Guy Williams is getting played off the panel. Very nice to see you on the panel.
Thank you so much for having me.
And Merry Christmas if we don't see you, because you're heading right away, aren't you?
Merry Christmas.
And Nikki Bazant, you're heading away too, so thank you for your help this year.
Oh, it's been a pleasure.
And all your appearances. And thanks everybody. We're back tomorrow. That's us and Checkpoint with John Campbell now.
RNZ News at 5. Kia ora, good afternoon. Ko Katrina Batten aho. The opposition is warning the government's books are very tight and that it may struggle to cover basic costs in the future. The Finance Minister, Grant Robertson, has opened the books for the first time since the Labour coalition government was elected. Here's our political editor, Jane Patterson.
The government has confirmed a family's income package expected to lift about 88,000 New Zealand children out of poverty. Mr Robertson says it can make good on its election promises and on the deal struck with New Zealand First and the Greens. Over the next 4 years, the government has about $6.6 billion of unallocated spending to play with. The National leader, Bill English, says that's going to be very tight and the government will have to work hard to balance the books in the coming years. From Parliament, Jane Patterson.
The Inspector General of Intelligence and Security has revealed the SIS unlawfully accessed customs data for almost 20 years. Cheryl Gwynn says the SIS had direct access to a dedicated customs computer terminal which contained information on passenger movements in and out of the country, including information relating to many New Zealanders. She says the data was accessed between 1997 and 2016, and she found there was no lawful basis for the SIS to access that information. The law was changed earlier this year to legalise that access. The SIS says the new law explicitly confirms its authority to access the databases and provides a clear and robust framework within which it can operate. Matata residents will continue to fight the Whakatane District Council's vote today that will declare 34 houses unlivable following the 2005 floods that devastated the town. The chairman of the Matata Residents Association, Rick Whaley, says he doesn't believe the council exhausted all options before going through with a change to its regional natural resources plan. Mr Whaley says the residents believe there was a memorandum of understanding between them and the council which has not been adhered to. The Bay of Plenty Regional Council will make the final decision in February next year. It's been revealed the former Invercargill police officer Ben McLean apologised to his wife's father following her slaying. McLean pleaded guilty in the High Court today to Verity McLean's murder and the attempted murder of her partner, his one-time friend Gary Duggan. The court heard that following his arrest for the shootings, McLean apologised to Verity's father and explained he'd lost control after she left him. The Crown prosecutor, Ricky Donnelly, detailed the meeting between McLean and Verity's father.
On 3 May 2017, the deceased father and a partner of over 20 years visited the defendant at the Invercargill prison in what was an emotional meeting. It was during this meeting the defendant said he was sorry and went on to say, "She wouldn't talk to me or have anything to do with me," and I snapped.
Prosecutor Ricky Donnelly. McLean has been remanded in custody and will be sentenced on Monday. The police have found drugs in plastic bags used by a criminal group to provide sandwiches to school children. 30 people have been arrested after a major investigation by Waikato police. Those arrested face a total of 87 charges relating to dealing methamphetamine and cannabis, firearms and stolen property. Detective Sergeant Christine Clark says members from various gangs were among those arrested. Ms Clark says the operation shows a clear link between gangs and drug-related offences. She says at one property the police seized 80 tinnies packaged in the same plastic bags used by the group to provide sandwiches to school children. The offenders have appeared in the Hamilton District Court over the past week. The families of CTV victims who met with the police today are unconvinced about their reasons for not prosecuting anyone over the building's collapse in the Christchurch earthquake, and they're seeking legal advice. The 6-storey office block was flattened during the February 2011 earthquake and 115 people died. In November, the police announced there was not enough evidence to bring manslaughter charges against 2 engineers who designed the building. Following a meeting with police in Christchurch this afternoon, Manel Casey, who lost his wife in the disaster, said he still believed the matter should go to a trial by jury. Detective Superintendent Peter Reid says the meeting was emotional for all those who attended, but the police stand by their decision. An Auckland councillor says a cabinet minister called him, urging the council not to dismiss the government's plan for the America's Cup Village. The council voted today to continue with its preferred option, which creates room for 8 teams by extending 3 wharves into the Waitemata harbour. The other option was the government's plan, which involves fewer extensions and moving fuel storage tanks in Wynyard Quarter to create room for the 2021 Cup Village. During today's meeting to pick an option, Councillor Mike Lee told The Room the Economic Development Minister David Parker called him during the meeting to champion the government's plan.
We shouldn't be deliberately dismissing it. I think we need to work in partnership with the government. The government will be also a funder of this event, and I believe we should respect our partner and listen to their views.
Auckland Councillor Mike Lee. It's 5:05. Sport Cricket's governing body says there's no evidence that this afternoon's third Ashes test in Perth has been targeted by match fixers or betting syndicates. Play got underway at the Wacker just over an hour ago, and the International Cricket Council has confirmed it's looking at video footage supplied by the Sun newspaper. The footage claims to show match fixers discussing selling information about rigged passages of play for up to $200,000. But the ICC says the claims are wide-ranging across several forms of cricket and countries, and there's nothing to indicate that players in the latest Ashes tests are involved. Meanwhile, England have chosen to bat first after winning the toss at the Wacker, and a short time ago were 69 for 1 wicket. The 4-time Tour de France winner Chris Froome says his legacy will not be tainted after returning a failed drugs test at the Vuelta a España. Froome had doubled the allowed level of legal asthma drug salbutamol in his urine. But Froome, who has had asthma since childhood and uses an inhaler during competition, maintains his dosage was within legal limits.
I do understand, obviously it's come as a big shock to a lot of people, but I certainly haven't broken any rules here. I haven't taken more than the permissible amount, and I'm sure at the end of the day the truth will be told.
Chris Froome. Cycling authorities say they're investigating the test results, but Froome is not suspended from racing. That's the news.
Debate. Does Kim Hill count as an institution?
Indeed.
What? Talking about age? Yeah, thanks.
You can't see where the foundations are, though.
Jubilation.
Did you do a little dance, Greg?
Yeah, they certainly had a smile on my face.
Straight talk.
When I'm faced with the public, some of whom will run on empty, on and on, I give it to them. You bet I do. That will not change.
And Star Wars 8 is released.
It was great. Fantastic. Phenomenal.
You don't have to go to a galaxy far, far away. Guy on Espiner and Kim Hill, Morning Report, weekdays from 6.
Then on 9 to noon, tackling teenage binge drinking. We go to Iceland to find out how it's all but beaten its drinking and drug-taking culture. And after 10, singer-songwriter Aldous Harding talks about the intensity and creative effort that goes into her incredible live performances. Join me, Catherine Ryan, on 9 to noon after Morning Report on RNZ National.
Met service weather now through to midnight tomorrow. Northland, fine apart from isolated showers, mainly mornings and evenings. Auckland, Waikato, Coromandel Peninsula, Bay of Plenty and Rotorua, fine apart from isolated afternoon showers today. Isolated afternoon showers for Bay of Plenty tomorrow. Waitomotu, Whanganui, including the central high country, mainly fine, isolated showers tomorrow. Manawatu to Wellington, fine. Gisborne to Wairarapa, showers becoming isolated this afternoon and fine spells increasing, mainly fine tomorrow. For Nelson, Marlborough and Canterbury, fine. Otago and Southland, fine today. Scattered rain spreading north tomorrow morning. Bulla to Fiordland, fine today. Isolated showers tomorrow. Turning to rain in Fiordland with some heavy falls possible. And the Chatham Islands, mostly cloudy today and becoming fine tomorrow. It's 5:09 and you're listening to Checkpoint.
Kia ora everyone, late sting tonight after the news rather than before it because I was upstairs interviewing the Prime Minister. Coming up on the programme tonight, a Matata homeowner who's set to be forced to abandon her home after a major flooding event in 2005 says she'll have to be physically removed from her property if the council doesn't make a fair offer for it. Really interesting precedent here. It's a big issue, coastal flooding. We're in court as Invercargill policeman Benjamin McLean pleads guilty to murder. The location of the next America's Cup base divides the government and Auckland councillors. And the director of a Māori play says he's delighted Don Brash has agreed to drive from Auckland to Whangarei tonight to see it. All of that and more, including the Prime Minister, coming up. But let's begin with the government throwing open the books for the first time and confirming details of a significant family's income package. They campaigned on it, of course. The Prime Minister says the package will mean the number of children living in poverty will be nearly halved, with 384,000 families getting more money each week. The package includes an extension to Working for Families and a boost to the accommodation supplement, a payment for young babies, as well as a winter payment for superannuitants and most beneficiaries. Our political editor, Jane Patterson, begins our coverage.
During the election campaign, it was the battle of the families package, with both National and Labour offering significant boosts to the incomes of thousands of New Zealand households. One key difference was National was also offering tax cuts, a policy Labour has scrapped to help pay for its spending promises. The Finance Minister Grant Robertson told reporters and analysts at Parliament the families package is the centrepiece of this government's programme.
This will be one of the major signature pieces of work of this coalition government. It will lift, when fully in place, 88,000 children out of poverty. The basis of this is the repeal of the previous government's tax cuts. That provided $8.8 billion worth of revenue.
Over the next 4 years, the government has about $6.6 billion of unallocated spending to play with. The National Party leader Bill English says that's going to be very tight.
No, it's not enough for the expectations they've created. They don't have any room to do more later. They've used it all up now.
Grant Robertson says the government does have options, for example in the event of a major disaster.
We've got a commitment to run a sustainable surplus across the economic cycle, but it does have the same caveat that every government has, that if there is a big major natural disaster, then obviously we take that into account in terms of whether we can run a surplus or not.
The Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern says the government has tried to target middle-income families as well as lower-income households.
One way is to increase the number of families who receive Working for Families. We've lifted the threshold for the abatement rate, so another 26,000 families will benefit from Working for Families. For Best Start, it doesn't abate out until $79,000, so more families will receive that payment in the early years as well.
ACT's leader David Seymour says there's little difference between National and Labour.
I'd call it an extension of the National Party tax and spend approach. If you compare it to what National promised in their last budget, it's actually not massively different. The problem the National Party has is they're now defending imaginary tax cuts. What they should have done is tax cuts when they were in power, and that's the great tragedy of the fifth National government, is not that it lost power to cut taxes, but that it didn't cut the taxes when it had the chance.
Also confirmed in the update was Labour's flagship KiwiBuild programme. In the update, Treasury says the government may struggle to meet that commitment because of capacity constraints in the construction sector. It says looking to foreign construction firms may be one solution, an option the Housing Minister Phil Twyford is open to.
Yes, we are willing to look at that. I mean, one of our goals with KiwiBuild has always been to grow the New Zealand industry, to grow more competitive companies that are larger, that can be more innovative and raise the productivity level of the construction industry. But to get there, there's no reason why we couldn't look at bringing in overseas firms who are used to building at scale, who can have manage the supply chain in ways that drive down costs, and that could be good for the New Zealand industry as well.
In terms of the broader economy, it's expected to grow at 2.9% on average over the next 5 years. Unemployment's expected to decline to about 4%, while wage growth picks up, due in part to planned minimum wage increases. Higher inflation is projected to see interest rates rise steadily from 2018. Contributions to the super fund will restart with a $500 million payment tomorrow. From Parliament for Checkpoint, Jane Patterson.
And we will hear from the Prime Minister a bit later in the programme. Asthma inhalers, groceries and extra petrol to cart the kids around are some of the things families say they'll spend a new boost to their weekly budget on. Under the government's new families package, more than 300,000 families are tipped to get an extra $75 a week or more. Nita Blake-Persson spoke to some of those hanging out for the extra cash.
I think it's pretty cool if we get extra money to help with our cost and with our family, yeah.
As a single mum living with 4 of her 7 kids, Manukau woman Janine Tauke says any extra cash is good news. She says as soon as her money comes in, it's gone on the same day, so she'll use the boost for extra groceries. It's not clear exactly what the package will do for her small budget, but she says $75 extra would make a big difference.
The little things for me and the kids, extra gas to go to the pools or to going out somewhere, extra meat to have nice steak, sometimes, or just little things like that.
The package is in response to a key policy promise during Labour's election campaign to combat child poverty. Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern says her plan will lift 39,000 more children out of poverty than would have happened under National. The package focuses on 3 key areas: an extension to the current Working for Families programme, a universal $60 per week payment for families with new babies, and a winter energy payment for beneficiaries and pensioners. Ms Ardern says she has spoken to frontline services to ensure the package will help those who need it most.
There is evidence to show that when families who live on constrained incomes get an increase in their income, that goes predominantly towards the cost and expense of their family.
She says there were concerns from some groups about how the Working for Families package fits in with some benefit payments.
We acknowledge there are a range of complexities that we do need to look at, and we're committed to doing a review of that space. In the interim, I want families to benefit as soon as we can, which is why we're bringing in these changes.
But Ms Ardern says there will be families who slip through gaps in the plan, including those with babies born before next July.
We were very aware that there might be a group of people that will have a due date of the 1st of July, but may have their child early. We didn't want them to miss out. We've made accommodation for those families, but ultimately we had to start somewhere, and so the 1st of July is where we start.
Salvation Army Parliamentary Unit Director Ian Hudson says the package is exactly what's needed to deal with the poverty they're seeing every day.
The overwhelming situation for us is that people aren't getting enough on the ground, and that's why we have this issue of child poverty, and we agree with the government's focus on trying to address that.
He says targeting young families as well as those struggling to pay their bills is a good move. Mr Hudson says housing remains a key issue for families in poverty. He's hopeful the government will address that elsewhere, but says the package will still go a long way. Mō te hōtaka o te ahiahi nei, ko Nita Blake Person Aho.
You are with Checkpoint on RNZ. Coming up on the programme, a Matata homeowner says she'll need to be physically removed from her property if forced to abandon her home. And this is a story with broader implications for many people along our coasts. And the director of Māori Play says he's delighted Don Brash has agreed to drive from Auckland to Whangarei tonight to see it. We would love your feedback on anything or everything we are covering. You can text us 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. We're on Facebook, of course, where you can also watch us. And our email address, as you know, because I tell you 419 times a night, is checkpoint@radionz.co.nz. It's 18 minutes past 5. Shocking details emerged today about how Invercargill policeman Benjamin McLean planned and executed the murder of his estranged wife, Verity. Benjamin McLean choked back tears at the High Court in Invercargill this morning as he pleaded guilty to murdering Verity McLean and attempting to kill her partner, Gary Duggan, on Anzac Day this year. After shooting his wife in an execution-style killing, McLean then lay in wait for Mr Duggan, shooting his one-time friend twice before a struggle ensued. Our Otago Southland reporter Timothy Brown filed this report from Invercargill.
With a single shot of a sawn-off .22 calibre rifle, Ben McLean killed the woman he shared 18 years of his life with, and together raised 3 children. As the 48-year-old candidly confessed to Verity's father during an emotional meeting at Invercargill prison following the slaying, when she left him it was more than he could take, and he lost control. McLean told Verity's father she wouldn't talk to me or have anything to do with me, and I snapped. The relationship ended on April the 5th, when his wife said she was leaving him for Mr Duggan. As details of his wife's murder were read out in court today, McLean shook his head and choked back tears. Crown Prosecutor Ricky Donnelly read the summary of facts and revealed details of McLean's internet history ahead of the murder.
On 12 April 2017, between 3:41am and 3:44am, there were 6 searches where the search term parameters used were .22, .22 for sale, .22 for cheap, for sale cheap.
On April the 25th this year, McLean and his estranged wife had a heated phone confrontation after she broke into the family home to retrieve her possessions. At the time, he was in Dunedin dropping off their sons with an aunt. Upon returning to Invercargill, McLean prepared a bag to take to the Otepuni Avenue address, where Verity was now living with her new partner. The items he packed were listed in court.
A New Zealand Police portable radio programmed to listen into the Invercargill Police Communications channel, a number of blue coloured disposable rubber gloves, a small bottle of hand sanitizer, a pair of black plastic ASP brand handcuffs and a pair of scissors. The ASP brand plastic handcuffs are the same make and type previously used by the New Zealand Police Armed Offenders Squad.
Ben McLean biked around to his estranged wife's house on the outskirts of Invercargill and after a struggle shot her in the head. The pathologist found she had 39 external injuries. McLean then lay in wait for Mr Duggan.
The victim, Duggan, arrived home at Otepuni Avenue at approximately 8 p.m. He removed a backpack from his vehicle and walked a short distance beside the deceased car when the defendant appeared from the driver's side bonnet and said, "Gary." Mr Duggan turned and looked towards the defendant to see him standing with the sawn-down .22 rifle at his shoulder, aimed at him. He was shot in the right upper chest.
McLean then shot him a second time. Despite his injuries, Gary Duggan managed to grab the rifle from McLean and hit him over the head with it, breaking the stock. McLean then took out a baton from his backpack and hit Mr Duggan in the head, and then tried to choke him. Mr Duggan managed to grab the baton off McLean and strike him on the head until he released the chokehold. McLean fled the property on his bike. He called his eldest son and told him what he had done. He told the auntie the boys were staying with, "I've killed her. I don't know why I thought it was a good idea." Police will not comment on the murder until after Ben McLean's sentencing on Monday, but did confirm today he resigned from his position of police constable in May. In Invercargill, for Checkpoint, Timothy Brown.
Let's go to the Bay of Plenty now, where the Whakatane District Council has today voted by a margin of 9 votes to 2 to force the owners of 34 homes in the seaside community of Matata, 24 kilometres up the coast from Whakatane, to abandon their homes. The Bay of Plenty Regional Council will have to sign off on the decision, but that is expected to happen. Even if you've never been to Matata, this has broader implications. First, it's an example of coastal communities becoming uninsurable and uninhabitable, echoing a report from the Ministry for the Environment about the need to protect billions of dollars of coastal property and the tens of thousands of people who live on it. But there are other issues here too around accountability. The residents of Matata were flooded following huge rainfall in 2005. Rocks, trees, mud washed through the community, destroying their homes. Locals were unsure whether they should rebuild. Some wanted to go, some offered to, but they were explicitly and repeatedly told a dam would be built to mitigate future flooding risk. It never was. But homeowner Marilyn Pearce says that promise was the only reason they rebuilt and stayed.
Yep, because they were going to mitigate it with a grill-type dam. So they told us, no, you can build, we're going to mitigate the risk.
And you did build. You spent money on that.
We did.
Yeah.
Yep, we rebuilt.
And you had been prepared to leave, but you were told the risk was going to be mitigated, and therefore you decided to stay.
And EQC, we raised up the land. We did everything they asked for. We got council approval, EQC approval, and our insurance approval that they would insure us if we rebuilt. It was yes, because the council was going to mitigate. My insurance company, EQC, have got all this from council, and everything was fine. Up until probably 2009, they started, somewhere along the line, the dam changed to a ringnet rather than this grill one.
So you were told everything was fine by your insurer, by EQC and by the council. You had been prepared to leave, but were told, no, don't leave because we're going to mitigate the risk with this dam. So you stayed, you invested in that property, and now you are being forced out.
Yep. They were going to mitigate right up to 2012. We had already built by then. We were back. We'd got all our land, looking nice, landscaped, everything. We'd moved on. Then in 2012, they decided that there was no viable engineering solution without it costing money. So their next plan was to do a plan change.
How much are they offering you, Marilyn?
They offered me $600,000. They devalued us and devalued us. It cost me more to build the house. And I think they've deliberately, devalued, knowing that they were going to go down this path. I think they've set us up to fail these.
So, Marilyn, after all of that, so what are you saying? You're not going?
No, they'll have to take, not just me, there'll be a lot of us. I mean, their offers are really ridiculous, and if they want the land that bad, they can pay for it.
And you would have gone. You would have gone. If they'd come to you after the flooding and said, hey, Marilyn, we don't think we can make this work.
They did. That was the whole thing, John. They came to four of us, and they were going to do a bund with a spillway that went straight through my brothers, my sisters, and my property. And we, at the time, we said, well, look, if this is going to save 50 other properties by doing this option, we'll go. So they got EQC, and Boyce and Campbell with the valuers come in and valued up our land, our properties, and the values of the property actually was higher than what the dam was going to cost. So they said, no, we'll do the dam.
And now they haven't done the dam.
No, they've done nothing.
And you are being driven out.
Yep. This is not voluntary. This is a forced. It's not even a public acquisition because we're not red zoned. We've never been red zoned.
And so what will you do?
This is a high.
What are you going to do, Marilyn?
Well, I'm not going. They will have to come in and physically remove me if this goes down where they want it to go.
What would make you go? Is it just that the offer's too low?
If that's the only option that is left to me to go, then I want a fair value. I mean, this is bloody prime coastal land here. This has been in my family since the 50s. This is not just about an ocean view, although it's nice.
Are you at home now? Am I talking to you at home?
I am. Yeah, you are. I am at home.
Are you by a window with a view?
I am.
Can you describe what you can see out it?
I look straight out to White Island, the Rauremu's whale. I can look down to Plate Island, to Tauranga. I'm about 90 metres from my door to the beach. I can look down towards Thornton, the Heads and Whakatane, down the coast. And then if I turn myself around, I'm looking up at the catchment of bushland.
That's where the dam was going to be, right, up there?
Yeah, it was.
And you ain't going anywhere, Marilyn?
Nope. Too old in the tooth for that. Where would I go?
Matata homeowner Marilyn Pearce. We are really interested in the powers that have to be evoked to get those people to go, and we will keep an eye on this story. It's coming up to 5:29. The director of a play about Māori trying to adapt to Pākehā culture says he's delighted Don Brash has agreed to drive from Auckland to Whangarei tonight to see it. Waiora, a Hone Koka play, has been described as powerful and emotionally charged. Its director Bill Walker told our Northern reporter Lois Williams he invited Dr Brash because he thought he was out of touch when he publicly objected to the use of te reo here on RNZ.
I think if Don comes and sits in that audience and sees how the communication that's going on, the communication often in Māori, you still get it because it's so human, it's just real, you know what I mean? And I think we've all forgotten that, what a wrench it was for Māori to move from where this lifestyle they had to the lifestyle that was kind of imposed on them by, the industrial capitalist society that Pākehā brought here with them,
So what did you say to Dr. Brash to persuade him to come up? How did you put it?
Pretty much what I just said to you. I said how the show's affected other people. The thing is, I also understand where he's coming from, you know, in lots of ways, because, you know, born in the 50s, this whole Maori consciousness and Maori language everywhere, and Maori on the news, and the arts, Maori is likely to get more funding than the non-Maori, you know. So those things that you can be annoyed about it, and you know, what's the world's shifting under my feet. And I basically relate to him, and the fact that he says what he thinks, I think that's a good thing. You know, you've got to engage or you never change. And there's a documentary on Netflix of a African American fella who goes and befriends the Ku Klux Klan. I'm not saying that Don's anything like that, because he's not. But you've got to talk to people you disagree with. You know, you've got to.
So instead of deploring him and discarding him as a pale, stale, white male, you've actually engaged with him and said, come and have a look at this and see what you think.
Absolutely, and he's been very, he's been very human in his response. You know, I've had a few email exchanges with him, and he's an open-minded man in some ways. Yeah, so I think it's a good thing that he's come up.
So that's the Post director, Bill Walker, talking to our Northern reporter, Lois Williams. Meanwhile, Dr. Brash, who will be blushing after those descriptions, told Lois that after that lengthy email exchange with Mr. Walker, he could only benefit from what he thought would be a remarkable production.
He began by pointing out that he understood why I felt uneasy about being exposed to Maori language on English language broadcasting. He had, I think, had a somewhat similar reaction earlier in life. He'd gone to a school where no te reo was taught, and I, of course, similarly was brought up in Christchurch, where te reo was not available, as far as I know, in any of either primary or secondary schools. So learning te reo as a child or as a teenager simply wasn't an option available to me. And I appreciated that way in which he began the thing, but he said, it's important that you do get a better appreciation of the way Maori culture is evolving. So I decided, yes, that was probably true, and thought I should travel north to do that.
So you're looking forward to it?
Yes, I am. I mean, I don't know quite what to expect, but he said it's a very powerful play. He quoted Kelvin Davis's reaction to it, which I thought was interesting, because I've got quite a lot of respect for Kelvin Davis. And as I say, the cumulative effect was to persuade me to drive north.
Dr. Don Brash talking to our Northern reporter, Lois Williams, who did a magnificent You are with Checkpoint on RNZ, 27 minutes to 6. Coming up on the programme, the Prime Minister on the opening of the books and reducing child poverty. How will what was announced today do that? Can it? And the location for the next America's Cup base divides the government and Auckland Council's business too. But before it all, Katrina with the headlines.
The opposition is warning the government may struggle to cover its basic costs. Finance Minister Grant Robertson has opened the country's books for the first time since the election in a bid to get more money to families. The Prime Minister says the government's families package will mean the number of children living in poverty will be nearly halved. The package includes an extension to working for families and a boost to the accommodation supplement. It's been revealed the SIS unlawfully accessed passenger information in and out of the country for 20 years. The law was changed earlier this year to legalise SIS use of the customs data. The Inspector General of Intelligence and Security says the data was accessed illegally between 1997 and 2016. The Matata Residents Association says it doesn't believe the Whakatane District Council exhausted all options before declaring 34 houses unlivable following the 2005 floods that devastated the town. The residents believe there was a memorandum of understanding between them and the council which has not been adhered to. The Bay of Plenty Regional Council will make the final decision in February next year. Meanwhile, a resident has told RNZ News the problem was more flood debris than the flooding itself. The High Court has heard the former Invercargill police officer Ben McLean apologised to his wife's father after her murder. McLean pleaded guilty today to Verity McLean's murder and the attempted murder of her partner, his one-time friend Gary Duggan. McLean has been remanded in custody and will be sentenced on Monday. 30 people have been arrested after the police in Waikato found drugs in plastic bags used by a criminal group to provide sandwiches to school children. Those arrested face a total of 87 charges relating to dealing methamphetamine and cannabis, firearms and stolen property. Those are the headlines. I'm back at 6 o'clock.
Which is 25 minutes away. Thank you so much, Katrina. Lovely emails just come in. We will read it to you shortly. But let's go to Jonathan Mitchell, older and wiser after his birthday yesterday. Tonight, the fast food chain operator Restaurant Brands, Jono, has posted a solid rise in sales.
Thanks, John. Yeah, this is the company behind KFC, Carl's Jr., Starbucks and Pizza Hut here in New Zealand. They've expanded into Australia with around 60 or so KFC outlets and into the Pacific with Pizza Hut and Taco Bell. This is the result, the 3 months up to early December. It was up on last year by about $54 million. The total was $173.3 million. Now, most of that growth came from the overseas acquisitions, so that was Australia and the Pacific. Locally, it's a bit mixed. KFC, certainly the strong performer still, but elsewhere it was a bit mixed. But the company is confident that it's got Carl's Jr., that's the burger chain, on a track to growth after a pretty negative period. Looking forward, the company is looking to get around 100 or so KFC outlets in Australia, so that's where some of the future growth is coming from.
A few company movements of note today, Jono?
There seemed to be a steady stream come on the stock exchange today, John. The noticeable one was the specialty milk company A2 Milk. Now, we had heard that Jeff Babbage was looking to step down. We know today now that he's going to be replaced by Jane Hurd-Leishke. Now, she's a familiar name in the Australian aviation industry, recently worked for Qantas and its subsidiary Jetstar. Next one was New Zealand Oil and Gas. Now, that's been in the spotlight recently, a takeover target from OG Oil and Gas. That's a majority-based company in Monaco. Nigel Finlay, its chair, is looking to stand down. He's saying there's a bit of change going on at the company, so his time to leave. And then there's Metro Performance Glass. That's been a bit of a disappointment to local shareholders. Failed to get really any good traction in the building industry. Its chief executive, Nigel Rigby, is leaving after 5 years. So a bit of movement there.
What happened on the markets today, Jono?
Yeah, a bit more to talk about today, John. Rose 39 points to end at a new record, 8,324.
Gosh.
That Kiwi dollar, yeah, quite strong, 70 US cents and 91.3 Australian. John.
Jonathan Mitchell, doing business news out of Wellington all week. Thank you so much, Jono. Just a lovely email in from Tanya Fretz, and we're going to read it. Dear Checkpoint team, this morning I sent a text, a morning report. Tanya, RNZ, hard out, with my wildest fantasy that Kim speaks with Don Brash so he can share his experience of seeing the play Waiora in Whangarei. I hoped he would reveal that he experienced a profound paradigm shift and that Kim would tell him, ka pai. To hear John Campbell announce that he'll be speaking to Hone Korka tonight has caused a flood of emotion. I saw Waiora at the Maidment Theatre, says Tanya, when it premiered in Auckland in the mid-1990s, gosh, 20 years ago. I was deeply affected. I couldn't breathe afterwards, couldn't speak or cry. The next day I booked a ticket to see it again, and once more in Wellington. The production and the cast were brilliant. Nancy Brunning, simply incandescent. Thank you, Hone Korka, for crafting such profound and iconic work. I could not be more thrilled and impressed that Dr. Brash is making the trip to see the performance tonight. Ka pai. Yes, we look forward to hearing what Don Brash thinks about that. He is driving up to Whangarei, possibly as we speak, listening to RNZ in the car. So we'll find out what he thinks of the play. Will he experience a profound paradigm shift, as Tanya describes it? It's 21 minutes to 6. A last-ditch ministerial plea failed to push the government's America's Cup Village plan over the line with the Auckland Council today. During a council meeting where the vote was held, the Economic Development Minister, David Parker, called Councillor Mike Lee to champion the government's option. But the vote in favour of the council's option was rushed through as it scrambles to apply for resource consent in the new year. Rather unusual state of affairs this business has been. Sally Murphy was there.
They're not faceless bureaucrats, Councillor Lee. They're people that we
Didn't
pay
say faceless.
profession.
I said a bureaucratic mechanism. Don't put false words in my mouth.
I think we all
it does you no honour.
Councillor, I didn't interject on you. When you were making your personal remarks, I'll call on you not to interject on me.
Things got heated in today's Auckland Council debate, but councillors still banded together to vote to continue with the council's preferred option for the 2021 America's Cup Village. At a cost of $150 million, 8 bases will be created at Wynyard Basin by extending 3 wharfs into the Waitemata Harbour. It was chosen over the government's preferred option, which has fewer extensions, but involves moving large fuel tanks at a cost of about $100 million. Councillor Mike Lee urged the council not to rule it out, saying it's better for the environment.
We shouldn't be deliberately dismissing it. I think we need to work in partnership with the government. The government will be also a funder of this event, and I believe we should respect our partner and listen to their views and not use bureaucratic mechanisms to shut their option down at this stage.
After further debate, Councillor Mike Lee dropped the bombshell as to why he was pushing for it.
The high official who called me at 11:17 a.m. this morning was the Honourable David Parker from Buenos Aires. He made the plea to include both options in the resource consent. Thank you.
But the Mayor, Phil Goff, has a different version of Mr Parker's phone call.
He was asked to contact one of the councillors from Buenos Aires, and he did not come in halfway through the debate. That is absolutely false.
So you're not worried about what might have happened this morning between him and Councillor Lee?
No, not at all.
Mr Parker's office says the minister was simply responding to a text from Mike Lee and was only discussing what he's already talked about with the Mayor. Meanwhile, Team New Zealand's Chief Executive Grant Dalton says the decision will create a Cup Village with an amphitheatre effect and is an important step.
That's done. It's one step, and there's obviously a number of steps to still go on that, the resource consenting, the discussions between council and government on funding on that particular project, and it's all wrapped up together. So these things are moving pretty quickly to get to a final decision as quickly as possible.
The council is expected to lodge resource consent for the village by January the 15th. Construction, which involves dredging part of the harbour, is planned to start in August next year. It is expected to take between 14 and 16 months. Despite the council moving forward, the government will continue to explore its own option for the event. In Auckland for Checkpoint, Sally Murphy.
Let's leave Auckland and go to the US, where Doug Jones's stunning victory over Conservative Republican Roy Moore in Alabama has handed Democrats a rare win in the Republican South. We covered this live last night, of course, one that threatens to imperil Donald Trump's legislative agenda and raises the prospect that next year's midterm elections could dramatically shift the balance of power in Congress. Quite an extraordinary state of affairs. Alabama voting for a Democrat senator. The morning after, ecstatic Democrats seized on the remarkable win as a sign of more victories to come in 2018. Although it has to be said the Republican candidate had serious and publicly identified flaws. Meanwhile, in the West Wing, Donald Trump had to swallow a very big dead rat. This report from CNN.
The people of Alabama have spoken.
Last night, Democrat Doug Jones did what few expected could be done when he first entered the Senate race in Alabama. He won.
Tonight, ladies and gentlemen, you took the right road.
Jones's upset win over Republican Roy Moore sent shockwaves throughout the country and in Washington, where President Donald Trump, who endorsed Moore despite accusations of sexual assault, tried to downplay the defeat.
A lot of Republicans feel differently. They're very happy with the way it turned out. We have to get more senators and more congressmen that are Republicans elected in 2018. And then you'll see a lot more of what we're doing right now.
Moore was also backed by former White House strategist Steve Bannon, who has promised to support populist candidates against more establishment Republicans in 2018, exposing a growing split within the party.
This person, to me, Bannon, does not belong on the American political scene. And there's nothing there that I identify with, and there's nothing there that really, to me, good Republicans or good Americans should identify with.
And from Alabama to Capitol Hill, Republicans are laser focused on passing their tax bill over the next several days. It's unlikely the Jones victory will impact the outcome, as it could take several weeks for Alabama to certify the election and for Jones to be sworn in. Democratic leader Chuck Schumer says Republicans should wait.
It would be wrong for Senate Republicans to jam through this tax bill without giving the newly elected senator from Alabama the opportunity to cast his vote.
Chuck Schumer ending that report from CNN. It's coming up to 5:45. The minister responsible for the country's spy agencies says he's incredibly disappointed. The Security Intelligence Service, the SIS, has been breaking the law for the past 20 years. The Inspector General of Intelligence and Security has revealed the SIS unlawfully accessed customs data between 1997 and 2016. Cheryl Gwynne says the SIS accessed a customs computer terminal which contained information on passenger movements in and out of New Zealand, including information relating to many New Zealanders. The NZSIS Minister, Andrew Little, told political reporter Benedict Collins that's not good enough.
Yeah, I'm incredibly disappointed about that. I know there's an explanation that the law was unclear, but I've made it clear to both Directors General of both the services and the agency that I expect them to be fully compliant with the law at all times. They are now, and the reason we have the Inspector General is to make sure that there is a good check and balance on those services complying with the law.
Sounds like no one at the SIS is really being held accountable for this, though. They get away with it scot-free?
No, I think you've had a public report saying that they've acted unlawfully. They've changed their processes and procedures, and they are now acting lawfully. I think that is a public holding to account of the agencies.
Do you think it's a bit of a pattern of unlawful behaviour by our spy agencies, though? We seem to have these reports time and time again.
Well, the reason you have an Inspector General, and the reason why the Inspector General's office was beefed up, is to make sure there is good oversight and a good check and balance on those agencies exercising their powers. The nature of their function is that most of their work is conducted in secret and in private, and there's got to be good, strong oversight, and there's got to be a reporting mechanism. The Inspector General's report is the way to do that, and I think we've seen both in the annual report and in these two published reports actually that the Inspector General is doing the job.
Andrew Little speaking to Benedict Collins just before question time, as you could hear from the bells. Let's head to Christchurch now, where some of the CTV families, they are the families whose loved ones died in the CTV building when it collapsed, say a meeting with police today over the decision not to prosecute anyone over the building's collapse was emotional and tough, but they remain determined in their fight for justice and accountability. The six-storey office block was flattened during the February 2011 earthquake, killing 115 people, way over half the number of people who died on that terrible day. In November, the police announced there was not enough evidence to bring manslaughter charges against two engineers who designed the building, saying the issues were finally balanced. But some of the victims' families, those who died, reject that. The police met with families in Christchurch this afternoon to explain the decision and to answer questions. Manel Casey, who lost his wife Masun Abbas in the disaster, told our reporter Maya Burry after the meeting he still believed a prosecution is possible.
Well, it was a very intense meeting, as you can imagine, for 2.5 hours. I must say that I am not convinced by the arguments put by the police and by the Solicitor General. As a matter of fact, I'm now determined to go ahead and keep fighting until justice is done. Because after this meeting, after listening to other family members, it was clear that the arguments put by the police is not convincing. I don't think it's even convincing to them.
And what makes you think that? Why do you so strongly believe there should be a judicial review?
Because they called it finely balanced. What a finely balanced means, it means that 50-50. And this is where things should go to court to sort, not somewhere in a room in Wellington.
Did the meeting go as you expected?
It was, I must say, very hard meeting, as you can imagine. I didn't expect the police that they will, of course, change their mind during the meeting, but I asked them, please go back to your offices, think about what we said. See, can you do something? The story did not finish. This is not the end of the story. This is not how it should end.
That's Marnell Casey, whose wife Mason Abbas died in the building. Karen Selway's sister Susan was also killed in the CTV building. She said the meeting had not made her feel any more comfortable about the decision to not lay charges.
There was lots of questions that I asked that I didn't get a direct answer to. Either the response was, well, that's a very difficult point, or that's complex, or oh, that really sits with someone else. So there's lots of questions that are still unanswered, and this, I think, is a process. This isn't just about the CTV building. It is about us as New Zealanders and having systems in place that actually deliver to us as we would expect. And I think that families probably see this as just part of an ongoing process rather than the end.
Karen Selway, whose sister Susan was killed in the building. Detective Superintendent Peter Reid says the meeting was emotional, but the police stand by their decision.
So, yeah, we've spent 2.5 hours this afternoon with the CTV families. I think it's been a very productive meeting. It's been good for them to hear the decision process that we've gone through and how we've come to the decision that we have. There was some very good questions, and I'm sure there'll be more questions to come. But I think it was a very emotional meeting as well, and we've covered as much ground as we possibly could today.
And do you stand by your decision?
Yes, absolutely. The decision that we've made is the final police decision in respect of prosecution.
Detective Superintendent Peter Reid, the CTV families will also be meeting with the Justice Minister Andrew Little on Sunday. It's 6:09. You are with Checkpoint on RNZ. British Prime Minister Theresa May is set to arrive in Brussels in a few hours for a key EU summit, having suffered a damaging defeat in Parliament over her central piece of Brexit legislation. By a slender margin, Rebel MPs forced a move that means they get a final say in the shape of any eventual Brexit deal. Mrs May will try to use the EU event to make the case for moving Brexit talks on to trade negotiations quickly, but European leaders will now be left wondering if she still has the political support in London to deliver any deal at all. In other words, will what they discuss actually happen? The BBC's Alex Forsyth has the details from Westminster.
To cheers from the Labour benches, Theresa May's government suffered its first significant defeat in the House of Commons.
The ayes to the right, 309. The noes to the left, 305.
Despite a day which saw a flurry of activity from whips and ministers trying to avoid such an outcome, 11 Conservatives sided with opposition parties and insisted on a legal guarantee that MPs would get a decisive say on the Brexit agreement. They weren't convinced by efforts, including from the Prime Minister, to reassure them that Parliament would be given a meaningful vote in good time. They weren't even persuaded by a last-minute concession, just 20 minutes before the crucial vote, promising ministers wouldn't act without parliamentary backing. The leading Tory rebel, Dominic Grieve, said that wasn't enough.
Well, I was briefly out of the room. An announcement was made of the government concession, but I have to say, it's too late. I'm sorry. We cannot treat the House in this fashion.
It was a day of heated debate, with Brexiteers accusing Remainers of trying to stop the UK leaving the European Union, and Conservative MPs turning on each other. Some who rebelled said they'd done so reluctantly, claiming it was essential to parliamentary sovereignty and democracy, while some of their colleagues warned of the impact on the government.
There's a summit tomorrow. This is not the moment to try and defeat the government.
This was a setback for Theresa May, the day before she travels to Brussels to meet EU leaders. But while this first defeat might have been unwelcome, the result was narrow, with just 4 votes in it.
It's Alex Forsyth with that report, Alex, with the BBC. Of course, just before we move on, we've just got a request from police. Witnesses sought for fatal collision in Dunedin. Dunedin police are seeking witnesses to a crash at the intersection of Dundas and Great King Streets. Dundas and Great King, Dunedin, at around 6 p.m. So this time really on Tuesday night. So what's today? Is it Wednesday or Thursday today? Thursday. I don't miss a trick. So 48 hours ago, 77-year-old pedestrian Judith Mary Egerton of Dunedin was killed when a car collided with her. The Dunedin Inquiry Section is investigating and would like any witnesses to come forward by contacting the Dunedin Central Police Station on 03. Of course, if you're a witness, you're probably in Dunedin, 471 4800. 471 4800. That's the corner of Dundas and Great King Streets. A 77-year-old pedestrian killed at basically this time on Tuesday night. The top of the South Island is getting ready to seize the Sunshine Trophy for clocking up the most sunshine hours in the country again this year. The region leads the Sunny scoreboard ahead of arch rivals Whakatane and Napier, but local mayors are starting to wonder if you can have too much of a good thing with southern towns drying up faster than usual. Isn't that becoming a theme? Here's our reporter Tracy Neal with the story.
The race is on for the Sunshine Trophy and it's going to be tight, according to Niwa weather scientist Ben Knoll.
So breaking news here, we now see that Blenheim is ahead of Richmond by 1 sunshine hour. So it's going to be a photo finish, it appears, across the top of the South Island.
Richard Kempthorne, the Mayor of Tasman District, which currently holds the trophy, says that's outrageous. But the downside to being New Zealand's sunshine capital is drought.
It's been quite incredible to go from a really wet winter and spring to suddenly be, I follow pretty much daily the water levels in the Waimea River, and it's very concerning to be dropping this fast at this time of year.
The Sunshine Hours trophy has bounced back and forth between the top of the South Island and the Bay of Plenty over the past few years. Some aren't convinced Richmond's scorekeeping is above board, especially as Nelson City, about 10 kilometres from Richmond, recorded 2 weeks fewer sunshine hours last year. Richard Kempthorne says there's a reason for that.
We have previously not had a recording in Tasman with a suitable gauge, and that was set up down at the racecourse.
Whakatane Mayor Tony Bond reckons it's time resource consents were needed for the equipment to record sunshine hours.
We made it notice to Niwa that they should actually look at the Richmond recorder, but we didn't get any traction there. So we're just good sports. We know that we're the sunshine capital of the North Island, and we'll be ready to take it off them.
Niwa's Ben Knoll says there's no special magic in how sunshine hours are recorded.
Mostly has to do with wind direction, believe it or not. We've had more northeasterly winds than usual across New Zealand over the last month or so, and that can bring some extra cloud to the Bay of Plenty, and that is what has allowed the top of the South Island to regain control of the sunshine race.
Meanwhile, the Mayor of Marlborough is making room in the trophy cabinet next to all the medals for the region's Sauvignon Blanc. John Leggett says he's confident they'll keep their slim lead.
We're looking forward to Richard Kempthorne getting on his mountain bike and bringing the trophy back to us. We had to pass it over last year. We're looking forward to getting it back.
And in case you're wondering about the other end of the sunshine scoreboard, Cloudy Days in Reefton placed it at the bottom, with Mount Cook and Palmerston North coming in at second and third to last place. Cromwell wears the crown for being the hottest place in the country after the mercury reached 33.3 degrees Celsius last month. The winner will be revealed in the Niwa Annual Climate Summary, which comes out on January the 9th. In sunny Nelson for Checkpoint, Tracy Neal.
It's 2 minutes to 6. Lots of feedback coming in tonight. Really interesting stuff too. This is an issue that is often discussed in newsrooms about court coverage. Chris, who says he is it could be a female Chris, I don't know which, he or she, is a long-time supporter and listener. Thank you, Chris. But Chris strongly believes the detail in our murder trial story out of Invercargill tonight was possibly too much. First time emailer Chris says, please record my displeasure. I don't think it's appropriate at this program's level. These are discussions that takes place, Chris, all the time. And the balancing act is between not sanitising reality, because this was a brutal murder. And the facts are very much on the record in court. And of course, they are very salient in sentencing. And the details can be appalling. And these discussions do absolutely take place in the newsroom. But thank you for that message. Lots of messages about Don Brash. Don Brash, if you're listening, Don Brash, you wind our audience up. Not all of them, but quite a lot of them. This from Shah, I think, in Christchurch. Hi, John. To be less fair to Don Brash than Honair was, I think Brash's unquellable irritation with Guyan's use of te reo stems from its context. Morning Report is part of Don's world, and in his mind, in that world, there's hardly a brown face in sight. Te reo is just fine until it's elevated to his level by a peer, such as Espiner. Lots of feedback coming in on Don Brash going to that play tonight, and some of you are congratulating him for doing so. And we look forward, although not all of you, by golly, to hearing what he thinks of it. Some of you don't look forward to that at all. Text us 2101, email checkpoint@radionz.co.nz. We are, of course, on Twitter and on Facebook. Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for the Pips.
RNZ News at 6. Ngā mihi nui, good evening. Ko Katrina Batanaho. The Parliament has gone into urgency to push through legislation implementing the government's families package. The $5.5 billion package includes an extension to working for families, a boost to the accommodation supplement, a payment for young babies, as well as a winter payment for superannuants and most beneficiaries. The Finance Minister Grant Robertson told Parliament the legislation will lift 88,000 children out of poverty and transform the lives of low and middle income New Zealanders.
We want a New Zealand where every child has the opportunity to achieve their potential and is supported by a kind and empathetic government. The message from voters was clear. Now is not the time for tax cuts when there are pressing social issues to be solved.
The Finance Minister Grant Robertson. The Inspector General of Intelligence and Security has revealed the SIS unlawfully accessed customs data for almost 20 years. Cheryl Gwynn says the SIS had direct access to a dedicated customs computer terminal which contained information on passenger movements in and out of the country, including New Zealanders. Here's our Deputy Political Editor, Chris Bramwell.
Cheryl Gwynn says the data was accessed between 1997 and 2016 and she found no lawful basis for the SIS to access that information. However, the law was changed earlier this year to legalise the access. The SIS says the new law explicitly confirms its authority to access the databases and provides a clear and robust framework for it to operate within. The Director General of Security, Rebecca Kitteridge, says she's pleased that in her report the Inspector General recognised that the SIS did not willfully break the law. Atuiti whare parimata ko Chris Bramwell aho.
The families of CTV victims who met with the police today are unconvinced about their reasons for not prosecuting anyone over the building's collapse in the Christchurch earthquake, and they're seeking legal advice. The 6-storey office block was flattened during the February 2011 earthquake and 115 people died. In November, the police announced there was not enough evidence to bring manslaughter charges against 2 engineers who designed the building. Following a meeting with police in Christchurch this afternoon, Man El-Casey, who lost his wife in the disaster, said he still believed the matter should go to a trial by jury.
I didn't expect the police that they will, of course, change their mind during the meeting, but I asked them, please go back to your offices, think about what we said. This is not how it should end.
Man El-Casey. Detective Superintendent Peter Reid says the meeting was emotional for all those who attended, but the police stand by their decision. Firefighters are beginning to bring under control wildfires that have devastated parts of California. They say strong winds which were spreading flames have died down. Fire authorities have now determined that a cooking fire at a homeless encampment was to blame for one of the blazes close to Los Angeles, which left a swathe of devastation through one of California's richest neighbourhoods. Francis Reid reports from LA.
Investigators say it wasn't deliberately started, but that it came from cooking from a homeless encampment. LA, of course, has a very large homeless problem, almost 50,000 people, and one of the many tragedies of that has manifested itself in these fires as well. Those fires in Bel Air, of course, saw many homes evacuated, burned 6 down and caused tens of millions of dollars of damage and covered all of LA in thick smoke. That blaze now is mostly contained, but the damage will be lasting.
Francis Reid in Los Angeles. Wellington Water says it discovered arsenic at a well-known city water fountain by accident. It says it was looking for alternative emergency water sources at the end of last year when it discovered arsenic in the Moore Wilson's fountain. Wellington Water's Erin Ganley says arsenic is found in some soil types, although it's not clear how it came to be in the bore.
The bore was originally drilled in 1926. It's into the fractured greywacke, and it's actually over 150 metres deep, which is quite unusual. So it takes water from the natural fissures in the greywacke, from the artesian water that trickles down through the greywacke below Wellington.
Wellington Water's Erin Ganley. The council said it immediately passed the results on to Moore Wilson's, but says it has no jurisdiction over the bore because it's a private supply. The fountain was closed in August after further testing revealed arsenic levels were just above the limit for drinking water standards. It's 6:05. Sport and cricket authorities are firmly rejecting claims from the Sun newspaper that the third Ashes test, which has just started in Perth, has been targeted by match-fixing syndicates. The Sun has released what it claims is undercover video footage showing match fixers talking about selling information about rigged passages of play for up to $200,000. The International Cricket Council says it takes the claim seriously and is looking at the information supplied by the Sun. But the ICC and Cricket Australia's chief executive, James Sutherland, both say there is no evidence that the WACA test or the Ashes series is subject to any corrupt activities. Meanwhile, play is underway at the WACA, and England, who chose to bat after winning the toss, have gone to lunch at 91 for 2 with captain Alistair Cook and James Vince both out. Black Caps all-rounder Colin de Grandhomme has been replaced in the one-day squad to face the West Indies by Doug Bracewell. De Grandhomme has flown to Zimbabwe following the sudden death of his father, and it's unclear when he'll rejoin the international squad. The first match there in the three-day one-day international series is in Whangarei next week. 4 times Tour de France winner Chris Froome says he's done nothing wrong after returning a failed drugs test at the Vuelta a España. Froome, who's had an asthma since childhood and uses an inhaler during competition, had doubled the allowed level of asthma drug salbutamol in his urine. Froome says he takes great care when using his inhaler and only uses permissible doses. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, the brains behind Burbs, a new web-only series of short dramas set in the suburbs of Wellington. Episodes focus on everything from unclaimed baggage at Rongotai to an S&M party in Seatoon and even a bus stop turf war in Strathmore Park. Our Changing World investigates the science of drinking and driving, and this week's cultural ambassador Paul Barrington celebrates the Chicago mutant techno scene of the late 90s on Nights from after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
Met service weather through to midnight tomorrow. Northland, fine apart from isolated showers, mainly mornings and evenings. Waikato, Auckland, Coromandel, Peninsula, Bay of Plenty and Rotorua, fine apart from isolated afternoon showers today. Isolated afternoon showers for Bay of Plenty tomorrow. Waitomo to Whanganui, including the Central High Country, mainly fine, isolated showers tomorrow. Manawatu to Wellington, fine. Gisborne to Wairarapa, showers becoming isolated this afternoon and fine spells increasing but mainly fine tomorrow. Nelson, Marlborough and Canterbury, fine. Otago and Southland, fine today. Scattered rain spreading north tomorrow morning. Bulletu Fiordland, fine today. Isolated showers tomorrow, turning to rain in Fiordland with some heavy falls possible. And the Chatham Islands, mostly cloudy today and becoming fine tomorrow. It's coming up to 8 minutes past 6 and you're listening to Checkpoint.
Thank you very much indeed, Katrina Batten.
No, thank you, John Campbell.
Have a nice night. Let's return to our lead story tonight, the government's Families Income Package. The Prime Minister says the package will mean the number of children living in poverty will be nearly halved. There's a figure attached and therefore a measurable target, 88,000 children by 2021. 384,000 families will get more money each week. We heard the details of this from our political editor Jane Patterson at the beginning of the programme an hour ago. But the package includes an extension to working for families and a boost to the accommodation supplement, a payment for young babies as well as a winter payment for superannuitants and most beneficiaries. I spoke to Jacinda Ardern just before we came to air tonight, and she told me the package is about addressing inequality. So I asked her, how does it do that?
Using working for families and by creating a new tax credit essentially called Best Start, we're able to put into the back pockets of 384,000 families, so low and middle income families, an increase of roughly on average $75 per week by 2021. That means 88,000 children are lifted out of poverty. And based on the numbers of children in poverty right now, that's a reduction of 48%.
The accommodation supplement, of course, was a National Party initiative to increase it, announced in the May budget this year, right? So you have picked up on that and run with it. Working for families, obviously originally a Labour Party policy, and you are increasing the amount of money people will receive under that. Will it be enough? The measure, of course, is the relationship of household income to median income, but will it, in a city like Auckland, make lives materially different in a way that children themselves will benefit from?
Well, what we know is that the increases have to be, for our low and middle income families, for it to feel significant, the increases actually do need to be significant. And that's why we've been so targeted. If you do things like this via income tax changes, you might on average see families, get $20 a week. But when you use a mechanism like Working for Families, and we've increased the number of families who will be eligible for it as well to reach more middle income earners, then that's where you're able to be much more targeted and increase the amount that they get. And so for us, this was the way that we could balance two objectives, make it meaningful, make a big difference, and make it affordable. And we've achieved both.
Not much money left in the kitty, is there? And so if we look at operating spending, if we look at capital allowances, if we look at the point Stephen Joyce is making, that the Coalition has set very tight operating allowances for their future spending and have left very little room for dealing with the ongoing spending pressures that any government faces. The cupboard is relatively bare.
I find that a really interesting statement from Stephen Joyce because, operating allowance, we're talking over 2.5 billion. That is higher than what the last national government was anticipating. So yes, look, there is no doubt as an operating allowance goes, that is tight. But we also have an expectation that we will be fiscally prudent, that we will run over some of the existing spending priorities, check whether they fit with ours, and make sure that we're working as efficiently as possible.
That expectation,
but it is absolutely achievable. In terms of capital allowance, what we've got as a capital allowance, once you take into account all of the things we've already committed to, is $12.6 billion over a cycle, and we believe that allows us to make the investments we need to.
Nonetheless, you are front-loading, aren't you? And that is, I guess, inevitable when you have a package that has a target of reducing child poverty in numerical terms and measurable terms by 2021. You have to, given that you have invested so much in this, given that you are front-loading, given that by any definition there isn't terribly much left over for a rainy day, this has to work, doesn't it?
Well, front-loading, I'd just call it prioritising. Of course, what we're achieving with this package is significant. It lifts more children out of poverty. It benefits families to a greater degree than things like a simple tax cut would. But keeping in mind, we've been able to do all of that while spending less than what the last government wanted to on tax cuts. In fact, $2.8 billion less. And the reason we wanted to do that is because we saw that actually we've got a range of deficits in education, in health, in our services that every New Zealander uses, regardless of their income level. We wanted to see them feel the benefits of this government too. So it's about improving the services we all rely on, whilst at the same time acknowledging that there are low and middle income families who really were feeling the pinch.
When will children feel the benefit? In terms of the kind of material hardships, and we've been looking at this on Checkpoint this week, that Kids Can and Kickstart address, which is to directly target children through their schools.
Yes.
If the funding for those programs desists, will the money that is coming to them through this announcement, these initiatives, make the instant difference that will make up for what Kids Can will not be able to do?
Yeah, and what I would say is that yes, this comes in July. That's when our budget cycle then is kicking in, and actually that's the lead time that we were told that departments needed to make this work, which is why we're bringing it in now in order to make it happen in July. I would have loved to have done it tomorrow. I would have loved for families to have felt the impact immediately. In the meantime, there is no doubt that need exists, and it would be premature to say any of those services will have a different experience with us as they have in the past. We haven't yet gone through a budget process to determine what funding for all of those services looks like, and they have made a difference to material hardship. They've provided raincoats and things that kids on a day-to-day basis need. But this is about acknowledging that for so many families who have tight budgets, actually they need the dignity of decent incomes. And yes, we can do that through things like this package, but actually we also need to do it through decent wages. There is no single answer here, and it is about making sure that as a government we have an eye to creating an economy that ensures everyone feels the benefit of our country's success and prosperity. And that's what our focus is.
Absolutely, and that's what National was saying too. And their response to it was increasing the accommodation supplement, which we've discussed you are continuing with, and the tax cuts. What is the material difference between Labor's response and National's response, and why do you think Labor's is right?
The material difference is, John, that National wanted to give me a tax cut too. I don't need a tax cut. And I had a number of people during the election who said I would rather see an extra nurse in my hospital or extra support workers in my school than see me individually get $20 a week. And so that's a significant difference. Keeping in mind, we make a bigger difference to the families who need it most while spending less as we do it, so we can also invest in health and education.
Jacinda Ardern, so the books have been opened, now it's straight to business. The government is hustling to pass its families package into law before Christmas. Parliament has gone into urgency, which means MPs will stay there till it's done. That could be as late as midnight Saturday. Here's our political reporter who's also there, Craig McCulloch.
No sooner than the books were open and the mini-budget out, the National Party was taking aim. A three-pronged attack, and here's how it goes. The new government is robbing the public of a promised tax cut.
Why is he planning to remove $1,060 from average median wage workers?
It's replacing it with poorly targeted support.
Spray and walk away.
While at the same time jacking up debt.
Taking it up to $70 billion in 4 years.
With the Prime Minister in Auckland, it was left to Deputy Winston Peters to defend the government's strategy.
Not to spray money around on consumerism and on giving tax breaks to your mates, and in short, not to take from the needy to give to the greedy.
There was plenty of hitting back, bemoaning the state of the economy National left the new government to deal with.
With countless district health boards being in debt, educationalists being concerned, the police being under-resourced and underfunded, you name it, it was a shortage.
We've inherited a massive infrastructure deficit from that government. We've got to build some affordable houses. We want to contribute to the super fund, and therefore we will take on debt to clean up the mess of the previous government.
The two parties' finance men faced off too, Grant Robertson and Stephen Joyce, the latter warning of trouble ahead.
Can the Finance Minister confirm that Treasury has added 28 separate new fiscal risks to the half-yearly update of things that it doesn't believe are taken into account in these documents?
The member completely misrepresents them. What that shows is we're an ambitious government with a lot of plans, and that's why the Treasury will cost those into the future.
MPs usually finish up at 6 o'clock on Thursdays and then head home to their electorates, but not this week. The government's determined to pass the legislation through all three stages before Christmas. That means debate will continue late into the night and then pick up again tomorrow morning. Atu iti whare parimata mō te hōtaka o te ahiahi ko Craig McCulloch ahau.
6:18. Invercargill policeman Benjamin McLean today pleaded guilty to the murder of his estranged wife Verity McLean. The police officer of 10 years shot Verity McLean in an execution-style killing on Anzac Day this year. He then lay in wait for his friend and his wife's new partner, former wife's new partner, Gary Duggan. Mr Duggan was shot twice by Mr McLean but survived. McLean will be sentenced on Monday, but as his case wraps up, it can be revealed 5 officers from the Southern Policing District have stepped out of line for illegal or questionable behaviour. So is it a case of a few bad eggs or a wider culture problem within the police? In Otago and Southland, Timothy Brown reports.
Invercargill Constable Jason Tehuia was off duty and drunk in September last year when he verbally abused a security guard of Korean descent who refused him entry to Queenstown Casino. Mr Tehuia told the man, "I can smell you, it smells Asian like a dog." He pleaded guilty to using insulting language and, despite the racist vitriol, was discharged without conviction in May. Southern Police have confirmed to Checkpoint he has kept his job and returned to policing duties. And Jason Tehuia isn't the only Southern officer to fall short. Former Constable Jeremy Bewis resigned in disgrace in August after being found guilty of a 2-year campaign of harassment waged against a Dunedin businessman. A South Otago officer is under criminal investigation for allegedly assaulting a woman at a costume party, and a Southland officer is on restricted duties and subject to an employment investigation after inappropriately texting a woman who sought police assistance. Most shockingly, Invercargill officer Ben McLean has pleaded guilty to murdering his wife. Otago University Dean of Law Mark Hennigan says questions need to be asked.
Once you start to see a pattern like this, I think it's very important for everyone to reflect on their culture, because I think all individual behaviour is a reflection in some way or other of the group. It's always too easy to isolate the individual and say it's their problem, but all individual behaviour to some degree is a reflection of the group. So I think it's something that has to be looked at very closely in that respect.
Professor Hennigan says Southern Police are facing a perception problem.
The police need all the support they can get because it's a tough job, and I think when a few let the rest down, it affects the whole public perception of the police, which is sad because I think they do a really important job and it's a difficult job.
Southern District Commander Inspector Paul Basham concedes this year has been difficult for his charges, but says it isn't symptomatic of a wider cultural issue.
I think we need to keep things in perspective a little bit, because we're talking about a very small, it's probably a percentage of a percentage in terms of the totality or the numbers of our staff that come under scrutiny in this manner.
Paul Basham says when officers fall foul of the law or police values, they are held to account.
Pointing to matters like Bewis and more directly with relation to Tehuia, it's important to remember that both those matters were put before the court.
He says that shows officers will be held to high standards. The police's Citizen Satisfaction Survey shows the proportion of the public with full trust and confidence in Southern Police declined significantly during the past year, while those with little or no trust rose. Inspector Basham says that is problematic, but unsurprising considering the high-profile fall from grace of a handful of police. He says he cannot discuss the reasons Jason Tehuia was returned to police duties due to privacy, but describes the process and decision which followed as robust. Professor Hennigan says police are subject to the same laws as any other employer, which may explain why Mr Tehuia is able to continue to work.
From a police officer, that's fairly serious in that context, because it's racist, it's discriminatory, it's all the things that are wrong. One may not understand the broader context, may have been under great stress. This is just the one incident, there'd been no previous behaviour like this. Those things can all be taken into account in contextualising how people react in specific situations.
The Police Association declined to comment on the issue as it represents several of the officers involved, including Mr Tehuia. The investigations of the South Otago and Southland officers should be finalised by Christmas. In Dunedin, for Checkpoint, Timothy Brown.
Let's go from Dunedin to the United States, where the Democrat Doug Jones has spoken of a new momentum in American politics after clinching a surprise victory in the Alabama Senate race. In a major upset, Mr Jones narrowly beat the firebrand Republican Roy Moore, whose campaign has been marred by allegations of sexual misconduct. His defeat is a big blow to the President Donald Trump, with the Republicans now down to a just 1-seat Senate majority on some issues. The BBC's Nick Bryant has been in Alabama reporting on one of the most watched Senate races in recent US history.
Amidst all the noise and rage of American politics, it's worth remembering elections are often decided in quiet suburbs. That was true in Alabama, where moderate Republicans didn't turn out for their party's radical scandal-hit candidate. and where many don't much like Donald Trump either.
It's a rejection of Donald Trump.
Tracy James is a lifelong Republican who yesterday went Democrat. It was also a protest vote against a president.
I do think Donald Trump has a problem in the Republican suburbs. You don't know what's going to come out of his mouth next. You don't know whether we're going to go to war with North Korea. You don't know if he's going to insult a woman in Congress. I think they're very uncomfortable with that.
Modern-day Democrats aren't supposed to win in staunchly conservative states like Alabama. It hasn't happened here for 25 years. No wonder the blizzard of confetti.
Alabama has been at a crossroads. We have been at crossroads in the past, and unfortunately we have usually taken the wrong fork. Tonight, ladies and gentlemen, you took the right road.
The losing Republican candidate, Roy Moore, thought he was on his way to Washington, but he was hit by allegations which he denies of sexual misconduct against teenage girls and shunned by senior figures in the Republican establishment. That's where the anger of his dejected supporters was directed.
It's really sad for the people of Alabama what took place in this state tonight.
You think you've been betrayed by the Republican establishment?
Absolutely. No doubt about that.
It's true, you can't always get what you want. A lesson for Donald Trump, who has strongly backed Roy Moore.
So get out and vote for Roy Moore. Do it. Do it.
So this is a big black eye for the president and also a failure of the Trump political playbook to deny accusations of wrongdoing as fake news and to attack accusers. With the Republican majority in the Senate reduced to a single seat, it will be even harder for the president to enact his stalled legislative agenda. The Democrats hope this result is indicative of an anti-Trump wave which will help win them back Capitol Hill in next year's congressional elections. This Senate race doubled as a battle for the soul of the Republican movement and thus marked a defeat for conservative insurgents against the party establishment. That too is a setback for Donald Trump and his unorthodox brand of politics.
Nick Bryant from the BBC, of course, reporting there. The latest analysis of Australia's wastewater has found the use of methamphetamine or ice has plateaued. Wastewater testing is now the established method of tracking drug habits. Ice use rose slightly in the Australian Capital Territory and New South Wales, but overall it was down. The report also found a prescription drug abuse remains a problem in regional areas. The ABC's Michael Edwards has the details.
Testing the country's wastewater provides a comprehensive snapshot of drug use. It detects traces of 14 types of substances and covers more than 60% of the population. Ice is still the most detected drug, but this year's analysis has revealed a trend welcomed by law enforcement.
The most important finding we found was between August 2016 and August 2017. The level of consumption of methamphetamine nationally has plateaued.
Shane Nielsen is from the Australian Criminal Intelligence Commission, which compiles the report. It's the third test of its type. It used 54 testing sites in both city and regional areas. Regional Western Australia and South Australian cities recorded the highest levels of ice use. New South Wales and the ACT remain the cocaine hotspots despite overall use dropping. Shane Nielsen says law enforcement operations seem to be having an impact.
With some drugs, for example, MDMA, there has been a reduction, and we think that's primarily due to the very large level of seizures over the past 12 months. With cocaine, there was a slight increase over the period, but it's well worth noting with cocaine that there's been a significant decrease in the second half of the year, and again, we think that's largely due to very large seizures.
Prescription drug abuse in regional areas remains a big concern.
For example, in regional areas, we have concerns about the level of use of oxycodone and fentanyl. Now, these are pharmaceutical opioids with abuse potential. And what our concern is there is, though, what we're measuring is both illicit and illicit use. There is a potential there for that to be diverted into the illicit market, and that's our concern.
The ACIC uses the data to drive operational and policy decision-making. The Justice Minister, Michael Keenan, says police are successfully targeting suppliers before their drugs hit the streets.
We've been working to give our police the resources that they need to find and lock up the criminals that peddle in this misery. We made the largest investment in drug and alcohol rehabilitation in Australia's history, $300 million. We established local action teams to bring together experts within the community so they could come up with a plan of attack to deal with the scourge of ice within their local area. And we've also invested very heavily in education, particularly for school kids, to explain to them the harm that illicit drugs do to them and do to their community.
Australia's Justice Minister Michael Keenan ending that report from Michael Edwards. Just before we go tonight, we talked earlier about police seeking witnesses to a pedestrian being hit in Dunedin corner of Dundas and Great King Streets at about 6 o'clock on Tuesday night. The 77-year-old pedestrian was Judith Mary Edgerton of Dunedin. She was killed when a car collided with her. We've got a lovely email from Lisa telling us a bit about Judith. Judith has a very interesting back history. She was the young teacher who was a heroine in saving a number of children during a very bad storm during December in the 1940s on the Rootburn track. She ran out to get help, alerting people to the trouble they were in, saving lives. She was never married but came from a large family and was much loved. Such a tragedy and so very unfair and sad, says Lisa about Judith. If you know anything about that accident, please contact the police. Thank you for joining us tonight. We'll be back tomorrow at 5.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. The Prime Minister has told Checkpoint the government's families package will benefit families to a greater extent than a simple tax cut would. The Inspector General of Intelligence and Security says information on passenger movements in and out of the country was unlawfully used by the SAS for nearly 20 years. A man who lost his wife in the CTV building collapse says he asked the police to reconsider after they announced a finding that there was not enough evidence to prosecute. And firefighters in California say strong winds have died down and they're starting to bring under control wildfires that have devastated parts of the state. Our next news and weather is at 7.
This week on New Horizons, it's new folkies in various forms, from Jim James of My Morning Jacket going solo again to a pair of comeback